You are now tuned into the truth frequency.
We are TFR. TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome to Phoenix Rising Radio. Now is the time to lift your mind higher. Now is the time to rise above. I am your host, Phoenix, and welcome to tonight's broadcast. Good evening, welcome everyone. This is Phoenix. Hope you're doing well. It is Tuesday, June 27th, 2017, and I hope you are doing well and having a good evening or morning, wherever you may be. And I hope you had a good weekend. Crazy stuff going on in the world. We have some interesting stuff we're going to talk about tonight, current events, etc. But we're going to talk about particularly the passing of someone, and I'll say who that is right after we bring our guest on, co-host, Ney Sey. Ney Sey, brother, how you doing, man?
I am still rolling, thank you. And yourself? It's been a while.
Yeah.
Or it seems like it's been a while.
Seems like it's been a while. Yeah, you've been busy doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I got to, we had the powwow, and I think we did do a show after that. Then I had an outdoor festival that's called Project Earth, where I got to kind of let loose and celebrate my birth recognition day, which was last week. I turned the big 5-0.
Really? Wow. Congratulations. Happy birthday. I knew it was your birthday. Speaking, real quick, because I've been thinking about this, I've been forgetting about this. You know how I roll. We actually had a listener that contacted us, sent Lake a request, and this listener, she wanted to contact you. So I'll be sending you by Skype a little later, probably after the program, that email and contact info. And again, it was a listener who was fascinated by some of the things you were sharing, and she would like to link up with you and discuss a few things with you. So just giving you a heads up on that. And anybody else, if you want to get in touch with Ney Sey, you can do so by how? How can they reach you, Ney Sey?
Well, there's a couple avenues. One of the easiest one is if you use my Gmail, which is all one word, themegaphoneman@gmail.com. That is my number priority one email address that I use. The second one is cannabis rez, REZ solution @gmail.com. So there's two alternative ways of getting me there, and I actually am discussing with a web developer about doing a Ney Sey page.
Oh, very cool. Keep us updated on that. Before we get into everything, I want to give an update to people. Also, I had sent out to everyone, not everyone, but it was posted over on goingglobalEastMeetsWest.blogspot.com, and also over on the Phoenix Rising Radio listener page, Facebook page, which is, if you want to search Facebook, look for Phoenix.rising.33, Phoenix.rising.33. And what we did was I put out an update today on Phoenix Synergies. Some of our listeners know what that is. It was Don Smith and Phoenix Synergies Corporation that 3 years ago we heard about. And people have been asking me about the status of that. And what I did was I put out what I'm calling an unofficial statement and update on Phoenix Synergies. And you can find that again over on the Phoenix Rising Facebook page. You can search Phoenix.rising.33 on Facebook, and you have to be a friend, be accepted to read it, or go to Going Global eastmeetswest.blogspot.com, and you'll get an update, an unofficial update and statement on Phoenix Synergies and the status of that, because we have had some people, asking questions, and rightfully so, because there hasn't been any information out. But you are free to go over there and find out exactly what we left. So anyway, hey, Ney Sey, tell us about, the last time you were on, I don't think we had a chance to talk about it a lot. What happened at the powwow? Did you get in any trouble or anything, or was everything cool?
I did get in trouble, and I'm actually...
Why did that not surprise me? Why did that not surprise me? I'm like, oh my God. Okay, dude, let me ask you one question. How does a guy in a wheelchair get in as much trouble as you get into? Seriously.
I think it's because I'm blind. I just kind of roll into it.
Okay, I can see that.
What happened is, they wouldn't let me do my cannabis resolution booth. And so we just brought some flyers, some buttons, and some T-shirts. I was actually going to give away 120 T-shirts that had the new logo on it. And we get there to the powwow, and we're just watching grand entry. And then my buddy that brought me went back to the vehicle to get my water and a couple other things. Next thing you know, the chief of police of the White Earth Reservation comes up to me, and he says, Kevin, if you pass out any of your buttons, shirts, or flyers, I will arrest you. And I said, on what grounds? And he said, I will arrest you. And I'm like, well, arrest me now. Do it right now, because I'm passing them out. This is freedom of speech. You have no right to do such a thing. So then I'm waiting for my friend to come back, because he went to go get my buttons and flyers. He gets back and he says, dude, I don't want to pass out anything. And I said, why not? And on his way back from the vehicle, he said that 4 of the police department members came up to him and said, are you with Kevin Shores? And he said, yes. And they told him if we handed out any of our things, that they would arrest him. And he said, on what grounds? And they told him, we'll make something up. And he's a white guy.
That's how, well, yeah. So, I can see it's worse for him because he's on the reservation there. And, oh, man. So what happened? Did you get arrested?
So we didn't get arrested, and he refused to give me any of my buttons, because I said, I'll just start throwing them out in front of me and just let people pick them up and say, I didn't pass them out. I just accidentally dropped them. But he wouldn't go get my buttons, and we kind of got in a little squabble because I said, you're just you're just being compliant. And this is what they do. This is what the police do. They use their fear tactics, so we become complacent and we give up our rights. And it's sad, but I am taking actions because it's against the Native American Civil Liberties Act. And so I'm actually looking into bringing him to tribal court and the powwow committee itself too. So, and I got some disturbing information, because I was just informed that the powwow committee gets $100,000 a year to put on our annual powwow, and they will not disclose how much they of the committee are getting paid.
Whoa. Okay. Well, how many are in the committee?
5.
Okay. Well, I'm thinking they each get 200,000. Boom. How's mystery solved?
Absolutely. But, it's frustrating, but it's one of those things that they claim that if we don't exercise our rights, they'll take them away.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I knew you had a tough battle when you were describing some of the stuff to me prior to the powwow. And, I was actually concerned for you. I know you're a big guy and take care of yourself and all that. You're an adult, but, you're fighting a tough fight here. And whenever we have a situation now, number one, you're on an Indian reservation. You can't get much more federalized than that. Yeah, I know it's the most free, non-free place I've ever examined. I've only been on an Indian reservation once, and that was a Mohawk up in northeast here, and that was just very temporarily until I actually saw and had explained to me the reservation police. They were Mohawks, and basically the person told me, these guys will get you, and that'll be the end of you. I'm like, what? They said, yes, it's like a different land, but it's not type thing. And, you're fighting a tough thing here because not only do you have the elders and different people who see this in a different way, and, I have to understand and be kind of sympathetic with the elders, Ney Sey, because, and it was done intentionally, that Native American basically were taken a great advantage of by alcohol and then later drugs by Europeans who came in. They did that intentionally. And it was a chink in the armor, if you will. So I think that's a historical thing that they battle with it. And there's a large degree of alcoholism and drug abuse. But I think mostly that's because of poverty, imposed poverty on the reservations. But the bottom line is, dude, you're fighting a tough battle. And then we get the current administration in the United States, where a lot of people were thinking when the Trump administration came in, they would be more open to, alternative medical uses of cannabis and possibly even legalization. But it appears just the opposite. Sessions is talking about bringing back the whole thing of the federales going against the states. And that was a big problem they had out in California. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you're an expert on this, but I'm not. I think California was one of the very first states that offered what was called, quote, medical marijuana. And they legalized it for that usage. They authorized and gave permits to places that grew it and clinics to distribute it. And lo and behold, after they were all set up and everything was running, the next thing you know, there were federal agents came in and raided the places, arrested people, shut them down, and it became a states' rights issue. And I think we're seeing that rise up again because we're seeing talks from the Attorney General Sessions of things like that, going, disregarding states' laws on that and sticking with the federal law. So the bottom line is, I think you're in a very difficult geopolitical time right now to be attempting to do what you do. I know the motive is good. The motive is purely to help economically relieve the pressure within the reservations and to help people. But you just have a tough uphill battle because traditionally it's not seen that way, and you have a strong federal push against you. So I don't know, man.
Well, it's interesting that I have made the prediction or theorized that this whole cannabis issue is going to be a huge federal and state fight where originally state was supposed to supersede the federal laws in that. But then I believe that the federal government intentionally got states dependent off the federal money or finances that they were receiving. And then in the last 5 years, all of those federal assistance to the states all dropped. And then it was like, well, if you pass these laws, then we'll start giving you this funding again. And then if you look at these new state laws where it's incorporating more power to the federal government.
Yeah, well, I tell you, that's always been a debate since our republic has been formed. I mean, right from the beginning, the John Adams, when he was president and before, I mean, even whenever, he was, I believe, vice president when George Washington, first president, he wanted a strong federalized government. He did not want the colonies at that time, soon to be states, to have any rights. And he was a strong federalist. And I tell you what, this has been a battle. And one of his primary opponents against that in that day was not Andrew Jackson, Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson wanted independence to the people. He was more of not an anarchist, but more of a independent, more of a freedom person, and he wanted the states to have all the rights and the federal government to have a very small amount. And this has been a continuous battle since our republic was born, and it continues to be so. But I would dare to say, and I think it's safe to say, that Sessions, the current Attorney General, is a very strong Federalist, and he believes that all the power belongs to the power of Washington, which is kind of odd. Trump, he's kind of hard to read because he's on some issues, it's like he's more for freedom of the people, but then he's very strong on the federal government side of it. He wants to impose upon the states their ability to determine who and when people come in, et cetera. And so he has a very strong federal presence, but he uses the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the color of that to justify a strong federal presence. So, it's not perfect. None of it is. It never is. It's a messy thing. A republic, and no, we're not a democracy. They say we are. We shouldn't be, and that's one of the other issues. That could be a whole program. But anyway, I was concerned, and sometimes they say you have to pick your fights. Sometimes it's best to run away and fight another day. So anyway, I just don't want to see you get your head knocked around with that.
Well, I guess I shouldn't be making such statements of like, what are you going to do? Taser me? But
man, just thinking that, I'm like, what are we going to see next on YouTube? Whoa, Native American tased in his wheelchair. It's like
right?
you're like your braids sticking straight out. Oh my God. Yeah. It happens. They do things like that. But yeah. So anyway, how other than that, now did they arrest you? Let's get some clarification.
Nope, it was just the threats of arrest, and that's where it went. And like I said, I'm trying to pursue some type of accountability because I do think that's absolute violation of our First Amendment rights. So it, like you said, it is the battle, and it's one of the battles that I enjoy being part of because I absolutely believe that cannabis could save the world.
Yeah.
And a segue from, go ahead.
Can I give it one bit of advice here? I know you want to do that. You're going to go with the accountability, but I'm telling you, and I'm sure you know this, but you have to think about this, and I've pointed this out to myself and others before. Sometimes we'll run on to individuals like the police chief, some of the tribal people you're talking about, and they go against all logic. You're like, you can't believe what they're saying and how they're acting, but you got to remember this. Look at the core issue. Look at their heart. Where are they coming from? Those police officers may think that they're doing the absolute best thing they can for the community, and they are morally right, and they are helping people. And by what appears to you, by infringing upon your rights, they actually think the greater good, they're saving some young child, possibly their child or nephew or niece, from falling into drug abuse. So you got to look at the heart and the intent, and you have to be willing to understand that and be willing to compromise on that and recognize their fears, their desires, and give them great respect for standing strong the way you stand strong. Just my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And the biggest thing with the whole drug factor on the reservation is that, and I think it's kind of an easy argument or a debate, that I would rather people on the reservation be using cannabis than heroin, Oxycontins, crystal meth, and alcohol.
Yeah, that's very true. And
And it's
very,
that simple.
it is. Okay, you made it safe, and yet, other than that, did you guys have a good time? Then we'll get into some other topics because we did have something we want to talk about this evening: the passing away of a former friend and associate of yours, and just a recent guest of ours, Joyce Riley. We'll get into that in a minute. But other than that, you have a good time at the powwow?
Oh, Dad. Yeah, absolutely. Just the opportunity to go to the powwow and to hear the drums, and then to hear all the jingle dresses, and and then you get the opportunity to visit and stuff. However, as we discussed before about the setting sun, remember how I've discussed about how the doors are set up to where the sun sets in the western door.
Oh, and
you guys,
you were going to examine and see how it was, yeah.
Yes, this year the guy said that it looked like it was 40 degrees to the north.
Whoa, weird. Okay.
And we're talking about a powwow ground that's been established for 149 or 139. 140. It's either, I think it's 149. 149 years our powwow grounds have been established to where the eastern and the western door are still in the same place.
Okay, so we're talking about sometime in the near past, you're experiencing, we, not just you, but all of us, possibly some type of pole shift. We know there's been a pole shift. We know the magnetic pole shifts, but for the actual sunlight to fall in a different spot, Stonehenge style or powwow ground style, we're talking about a physical pole shift. We're talking about a canting of the earth.
Right. Yeah. And we estimated, because of the powwow timing is usually around the equinox, or it's always around the 14th, usually the end of the first week or the beginning of the second week, depending on how it lies. And, the beginning or ending of the second week. And so you can do like a 5-degree, trial or 5-degree error, to the north or south, but it has continuously from 1999 when I first started, when I was able to visually see it setting in the western door, it has in 17 years, it has shifted almost 45 degrees.
Wow. Yeah, and that's the way it works. Just small amounts, almost till it's unnoticeable. It's amazing.
And hopefully, we're actually, a couple friends of mine are helping me dig through all of my photos, and we're going to try to do a PowerPoint or like a screen by screen shot where you can actually see at each powwow where we've taken pictures of the setting sun.
Now, that would be very beneficial. That would be very helpful and scientific, I'd have to say. I hope you can do that. Keep us updated on that. We got like 3 minutes to go before rolling to the break here. This evening, we're going to be talking about, coming back on the other side of the break, Joyce Riley, Nurse Joyce Riley, who passed away. When did she pass away? Was about a week ago?
Was it Friday or Saturday?
The 25th, June 25th, she passed away.
Oh, wait, today's the 27th, Sunday it was.
Yeah, she passed away, and she was a guest here on Phoenix Rising Radio with you, Ney Sey, 1 month ago. And may she rest in peace. And we'll talk a little bit about her and your connection with her and some of these other things.
We might have done the last interview of Joyce.
I think we did. As far as I can tell, Lake was doing some research on and looking about, what Joyce has been doing. And I believe you are correct. I'm not even sure if she did her own shows because she had someone else doing the Power Hour. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, Daniel, a gentleman that has been, I want to, 3 years now, 2 years, has been helping her. And then in the last year, it's been less and less time where she would be on, as her condition progressed. And it's unfortunate because I did talk to her just before the powwow, and then I talked to her very briefly the week after. About 2 weeks ago, I was trying to call her once a week just to check in on her.
Yeah.
And and then last week, no one was answering, and I've been leaving messages. So, but yeah, incredible woman, and we'll discuss more about that after the break with the American Gulf War Veterans Association.
Yeah. Yeah, if everyone missed that, and again, as far as we can tell, this was the very last interview done on radio with Joyce Riley, and that was right here on Phoenix Rising Radio. And we did that a month ago, about almost a straight month ago, I believe it was. And I don't have the link to that right here or the exact date. We'll find that. But yeah, a wonderful woman, very bright, helped so many people all over the world. Selflessly, just gave of herself. And even more than I imagined, that she disclosed so much when she was on the program. And I'm so happy that she was able to be here with us, Ney Sey. It was really wonderful. And I remember, and she got a chuckle out of it, I remember listening to Joyce Riley many years ago on shortwave radio. And I told her that, and she laughed. I said, yeah, I remember when I used to listen to you.
Out of Texas.
Yeah, shortwave, and she laughed. She goes, "Oh my gosh, yeah," because that was the original alternative media, was shortwave radio long before the internet and alternative media on the internet. And some of our listeners are very familiar with that, and some of our listeners are like, "What are you talking about?"
Well, I make the comment that Joyce gave me the parachute when I jumped down.
No hate, no hype, no fear.
You're listening to Truth Frequency Radio.
We are TFR.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
And welcome back, everyone. I'm joined this evening with Ney Sey. He's hanging out with me. It was his birthday the other day. Happy belated birthday to him. We're going to talk a little bit tonight. We had a guest, and Ney Sey and I are going to talk a little bit about the memory and to honor the memory of Joyce Riley, who passed away June 25th. And Joyce was a special guest 1 month ago. And she may have been, here on Phoenix Rising Radio, right here on Truth Frequency Radio, may have been her last broadcast. As far as we can tell, we believe it is. And may she rest in peace. She was a beloved woman. Joyce Riley was a registered nurse who had been the director of nursing for 4 institutions and had been a heart, lung, liver, and kidney transplant nurse. She also served as a captain in the United States Air Force in support of Operation Desert Storm, flying active duty missions on a C-130 aircraft from Alaska to Cuba. Her experience as medical, legal, testifying expert in medical malpractice trials gave her the background to investigate the truth about the Gulf War illness. And we'll talk a little bit about that. She has since become from that point, an advocate for all veterans and citizens. And those citizens that she was advocate for were experimented upon by the United States government. Joyce was a whistleblower in the famous baby death case in which Nurse Jenna Jones, who now serves a life sentence in the Texas prison system, was convicted of causing injury to many babies in the Breckster County Hospital in San Antonio, Texas. And she also served as the spokesperson for the American Gulf War Veterans Association. Yeah, Joyce Riley, wonderful woman, and she will be missed. What are your comments, Ney Sey?
Well, back in 1995, when I am trying to find out what's the causation of why I'm getting this arthritic-like sickness, and a buddy of mine asked me if I knew about the Gulf War illness, and I was like, "Of course I've learned about it, but how could I have it? Because I was not there in the Persian Gulf during the Gulf War. However, I was there during the Kuwaiti oil crisis." And he said, "Well, everything that I've read about Gulf War syndrome is exactly what's going on with you." And he offered to bring me to this event in Wisconsin. So we drove to go see Joyce give her presentation about Gulf War illness, and she described the exact progression of my illness. And at the end of the presentation, I went up to her and introduced myself, and she asked, what did I do over in the Persian Gulf? And I told her I wasn't there during the war, that I was there during the Kuwaiti oil crisis. And then she leaned into me and whispered into my ear that more and more veterans are showing symptoms of being sick without even being in the theater of the Persian Gulf. And this is when I started looking into vaccinations, because I just, ironically and synchronistically, I just got a videotape of William Cooper's his Mystery Babylon before the transcripts of Behold the Pale Horse.
Right.
And so I was dabbling around the rabbit hole, and like I said, Joyce gave me the parachute and I jumped down. And from meeting Joyce, all of a sudden I started learning of the atrocities of what has occurred with the veterans. And then I learned of the atrocities of the government and the Department of Defense and these alphabet agencies, where they would do these heinous experiments against the Geneva Code of Conduct, and just get away with it. And so when we were doing all of our investigations on what our theories were, I stuck to the vaccines. But there was multiple reasons for illness, from biological and chemical weapons being used to the explosion or to the destruction of weapons of mass destructions in bunker complex. One thing or another, veterans have consistently, unfortunately, been used as guinea pigs. And one thing that I did is I said, forget it, I'm not listening to the VA anymore. And I revamped my diet, and I went into organic and natural foods, and stopping with alcohol and sodas, and, just eating healthy. And all of the veterans that I met back in the late 90s, they're all dead. And I believe the reason why I'm still around is taking the advice of Joyce and looking into all of these alternative remedies, because that's what she also did. She was a strong advocate with the American Gulf War Veterans Association, but then around 2000, she started up her show, The Power Hour, and it got syndicated, I think, with GCN, and then it was being heard worldwide, and this woman was so incredible. When she lived in Texas, I said I wanted to have her come up to Minneapolis and do a presentation at the Minneapolis Community and Technical College. And she said, if you set it up, I'll be there. And so I set it up to where she could come and do a presentation, and her husband at the time, David Von Kleist, they drove from Texas all the way up to Minneapolis, and they did a presentation. And for that presentation, I sent out emails to every state House legislator and told him to come and witness this presentation about Gulf War illness, because there was thousands of veterans in the state of Minnesota. You know, and
let me interrupt just a little bit here. I want to kind of reinforce your theory. I know you heard me say this when Joyce was a guest on our show a couple weeks ago, a month ago, I guess it was. And I don't know if you remember me saying this, but I had a friend years ago as a captain, and he came up to me, he goes, man, he says, I think I've got Gulf War syndrome. This is when Joyce had already started, telling people. The word of this was getting around in whispers. This is when it still wasn't an accepted thing. And he goes, but the problem is, he goes, I didn't go to the Gulf. I'm like, really? I said, well, what do you think? And he gave me all the symptoms. I'm like, yeah, that's classic Gulf War syndrome, because I had listened to Joyce before and different things. And I said, well, what do you think happened? He goes, and he told me where he was at. I won't disclose this on the radio, but he was at a military base doing some paperwork or something. It wasn't his base station, but he walked into a door, and he's like, and they closed the door behind him, and he looked. He wasn't familiar with where he's at, and it's like all these guys there, all these troops, and some other people. Some of the people were armed, and he goes, oh. He turns around. He's got his file in his hand, and he goes to go out the door, and an MP steps in front of him. He goes, I'm sorry, sir, you can't leave. He goes, oh, no. He goes, I came in the wrong door. He goes, no, sir, you can't leave through this door. He goes, well, how do I leave? He said, you have to go through that door. It's like, okay. So he works his way through the crowd. He sees her getting shots, immunizations, and people are going out the door, signing the paperwork. He goes to go out the door, and they step in front of him like, sir, you can't leave. And it's like, what do you mean I can't leave? He said, you haven't had your shot. He said, I don't need to get a shot. I'm not here for that. And he went round and round with these guys. But the bottom line is that man did not leave that room until he had his shot. And it was a pre-deployment readiness for the Gulf. That's where these guys were going. So he ended up getting a shot. He's like, the hell with it. Give me my shot so I can get out of here. He was just like, okay, whatever. He wasn't thinking about what was in it or anything. He's like, okay. And he didn't have his medical records. They gave him the shot. They're like, okay, where are your medical records? He goes, I don't have them. I wasn't supposed to be here. And they're like, well, okay, whatever. And he was able to leave because he had a shot. And he actually came to me and said, I think I got sick from the shot, because his hair started falling out, and the other symptoms of Gulf War syndrome, but he didn't know who to talk to. And I'm like, wow, I don't know what to tell you. But he was pretty upset about it. So I think your theory, well, no, I take that back. I know your theory of the immunization, the cocktail that they were giving everybody of allegedly this anti-biological and chemical warfare shot they were giving everybody is where this came from. I really believe it, Kevin.
Oh, yeah. Well, private, and now at Joyce's passing, private conversations with Joyce, she also was a strong believer of the inoculations. And this woman has been threatened. This woman has been threatened on numerous occasions, and incidents have occurred where she was fear of her life. Yeah. I remember a couple times talking to her when she moved down to Missouri, that there were people messing with her on her little area of land where she lived, and this was just after the 2000, right after 9/11, when they wanted to do the anthrax vaccinations, the mandatory anthrax vaccinations, and pilots were getting out of the military. They were like saying, no way, we're not going to take these shots. And they would get early outs just to be like, no, we're not going to take these shots.
I remember that. Yeah.
And this was the other thing too that Joyce did is when I moved up into Moorhead, Minnesota in 99, because when we did that presentation in 98 at the Minneapolis Community and Technical College, it defeated me because, like I said, I contacted all these legislators Jesse Ventura was claiming to be going to be there, and all of this stuff. And there's maybe 13 people showed up for it. And I was posting all around the city about this event and at the Capitol, and nobody showed up. And not nobody, 15 people at the most. And I was like, screw this. I'm just going to focus on school. And I said, I'm moving from Minneapolis. I want to go to a little small town closer to the reservation. So I move up to Moorhead. And then in 2000, my neighbor comes over with this anthrax safe clipping from the newspaper. And it's saying, the anthrax vaccinations are safe. We tested them on guinea pigs. And then I just kind of lost the nut on that one because I'm like, of course, we're the guinea pigs. And so I started getting vocal again. Mm-hmm. And then Joyce Riley came up, and I asked her again, if we can get, and we had a town hall meeting with Ed Schultz, and we had over 400 people at this town hall meeting, and she went through her 3-hour presentation, and they simulcast and did a live broadcast here in the Fargo-Moorhead area on KFGO. And then rumor is that an Air Force, Army, and some other suits came up to Ed Schultz after the presentation later that evening when they were picking up. And that was the last time Ed was seen that evening. And then the next day, and you would think the very next day, the whole show would be about the town hall meeting. But not once again did Ed Schultz talk much at all about Gulf War illness, nor would he let me be on his radio show anymore. And then surprisingly enough, it was almost 6 to 8 months later, Ed Schultz announces that he just got a national syndicated radio show, and he started becoming the Democratic speaker on what was that? I can't remember the Sunday TV show. They called him the Mouth of the Heartland.
Okay.
But yeah, and I speculate that he was talked to and said, look, you play our game, we'll give you the rewards. And he took it.
Works. That's the way it works. This whole thing, what you did, what you attempted, what Joyce did, it helped a lot of people. But sometimes, I'm telling you, sometimes we have to choose our battles. And I'm not telling people not to stand up, because we actually had an issue, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Evil, and this is a very, very famous quote, one of my favorite quotes, evil prevails when good men and women do nothing. I mean, if we don't stand up when we need to, that's when things get worse. And we have to do that. And you have done that. Joyce has done that. I have done that. Other people have done that. But sometimes there's an error. We have to err on the side of wisdom. And there comes a point, people, when you have to pick your battles. And there's a proverb, an ancient proverb, that says it's better to be a live dog than a dead lion. Because sometimes the most strategic and tactful and smart thing you can do is retreat. Tactical retreat. But you have to know, I'm not saying be a coward and run away from everything. I'm just saying be wise. Sometimes it's best to be as wise as a serpent and as harmless as a dove. And that's the way we have to roll sometimes. And I know, but see, the guy that you're talking about, it's a common thing. People get bought off. We've heard stories about this before. I think I told this story one time when talking about alternative energies and fuels. There was a story, it was on television. This is back in the, late 70s. It was during like the oil crisis. I think Jimmy Carter was president. Remember all that nonsense?
Oh, yes.
So everybody was all about getting off of he went to the government K cars, and he would like turn the temperature down, and this whole thing about getting off of independence of foreign oil. So there was an inventor, a couple inventors, and these guys came up with an automobile. It was gasoline engine, but it was somehow they had tweaked this thing. It was a full-size sedan, and they were driving all the way from Florida to Washington, D.C., and there was like a major news network that was following them. There were a few. It was like, ABC or NBC, whatever. And like every evening at noontime, they were talking to these guys, interviewing. They'd say how far they've gone, how much gasoline they use. And these guys got, Ney Sey, almost, it was like the night before they were going to Washington, D.C., and they had only used, I think, all the way from Florida up to outside of Washington, D.C., only like a gallon and a half of gasoline, something crazy like that, right? So like a really, really low amount. And it was like all being gauged and monitored and filmed. But an odd thing happened. The news crews were there, and they say the car stopped. And I think there was some film of it too, but it was very far away. The car stopped. There was a sedan that met the men and talked to the men. And you can see them talking. And apparently, according to witnesses, the men who stopped these men gave them a suitcase. And the men took that suitcase, got into the other car that had approached them with two other men. And the two men that walked out and gave them the suitcase got into the experimental car. It turned around and drove away from the cameras. And that was the end of the story. It was never brought up again. So they bought these guys off, man. I mean, they were, and they were going to be like the heroes of the nation. And it was like, man, no, we never covered that. And it was like a 4-night story that like never existed. And, that's just one incident of many. And sometimes people are paid off, like the guy you're talking about that you had experience with. Sometimes it's out of fear. Sometimes these people are killed. And, for health issues. And this is the damn thing about it, Ney Sey. Man, why? 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 I know it's out of greed and fear or whatever, but my God, this technology's got to come out. I had somebody call me one night on the air, and they said, when is disclosure going to be, Phoenix? I'm like, what are you talking about? Alien disclosure? It's like, no, disclosure of all these technologies. I'm like, yesterday. He goes, what? I'm like, yesterday, the day before. Things have been disclosed to us. They've attempted to disclose this stuff to us for decades, but it gets squashed. So the real question is when is the government going to stop oppressing medical breakthroughs, medical technologies, and changes that can benefit mankind? That's the question, and the medical stuff. I mean, talking about Joyce Riley and the Gulf War syndrome, I guess we're basically talking about not medical breakthroughs, but medical, what would you say, experimentation on innocent human beings?
Well, I mean, D, all of the above. Yeah. But, with Joyce, interacting with Joyce and getting my name out there, was, it was like a blessing and a curse, and you can't unknow something, because once you know something, you can ignore it, but you can't unknow it. And I've received like documents in like brown plain wrappers, and Joyce has given me government documents where you read through this, and it's there for all of us to access. We can go to the Library of Congress and get these government. Well, actually, I don't know if you can now, but you could at the time, and you would just read the title of these documents, and it would just be mind-boggling. And it's like, why have we not revolted?
Oh, why not? Don't realize people are too busy. One of those type of documents, and there are hundreds of thousands of them, I'm sure, that used to blow my mind when I learned about it when I was a young man, and this will resonate with you. And it's used to be, again, it's all supposed to be there in the Library of Congress, and it was titled The Genocide of the American Indian. what it was a plan that was written out and presented to Congress or the president about how exactly to eradicate, quote, the American Indian from North America.
Yeah, wasn't that from the Department of Interior?
Something like that. But it actually specifically used the word genocide right in the title. And it was like a plan that they presented, like, oh, how do we get rid of these savages? How do we commit genocide? And it's actually in the Library of Congress. So, anyway.
Right. Well, Joyce had this one document, and I've since lost it, and it rips my heart because every time we talk, I keep reminding her of it, and she, and I didn't want to press it because of her health and stuff like that, but she has so many documents. I mean, I was like, what are you going to do with all your documents, Joyce? And it's like, I know I can't read them, but I'll take them. I'll take them if you don't want them, Joyce. And I actually was like pestering her about, what's going to happen with the American Gulf War Veterans Association, because, I mean, I told her I'd be willing to, take it over and do what I can with it, even in my condition, but she gave me a document that discussed about we were sending hired sharpshooters to go into Vietnam and kill our own POWs. That in the late 80s, the middle to late 80s, there was some of these Vietnam vets that were going back to Vietnam and looking for the remains and looking at these POW camps for their brothers and comrades. And they were coming back.
What's the name of the special forces guy? It was a colonel that did that. I think he did a movie about it. You know who I'm talking about? I
can't remember the name, but I know what you're talking about. One of the Rambos was supposedly kind of a offshoot of the whole story about, but so these guys were going back to Vietnam and they were finding evidence that some of the POWs were still there, but they were moving them around like on cycles. So they weren't in one camp for, over like a 4-month, 3-month or whatever it was. And then because of, we were supposedly putting all the Vietnam stuff to rest, that we didn't, the powers that shouldn't be are like, we don't want to stir this all up again. And that one of the scenarios was sending snipers there to take out our own POWs so it wouldn't cause, a whole crap storm again.
Yeah. Oh, I just remembered Colonel Bo Greitz. Bo Greitz. Remember him?
That sounds right.
Oh, that's him, dude. Oh, man, what a character. His Special Forces commander, a big red mustache. I met the guy one time. He was down. I was in Panama doing something when Noriega was down there. We were doing some stuff. And it was me and a fellow from the Ranger Battalion I was with at the time. We're sitting in this like little military PX type pub or something, a real shoddy place. And this guy comes rolling in there, man. He's got a sidearm. He's got his green beret on. He's looking all shady, looking back and forth. He looks over, he sits down with us. He goes, Rangers, like to meet you. And when you jump up, he's like, at ease. He's like, it was Colonel Bo Greitz. And he was there. There's a beer. I'm glad to be here with you. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. And we drank a beer together. Then he looks to his left, looks to his right, jumps up and runs out of the place. I'm like, what the hell was that? Bo Greitz. Anyway.
This is Truth Frequency Radio.
The wicked ones obviously under heavy Masonic influence.
Welcome to Phoenix Rising Radio. Now is the time to lift your mind higher. Now is the time to rise above. I am your host, Phoenix, and welcome to tonight's broadcast.
Back to Phoenix Rising Radio here this evening on Truth Frequency Radio, where truth is premier. And I'm joined tonight by Ney Sey, and we're talking a little bit about everything. Joyce Riley, the past half hour, we've been discussing her and the great things that she did in the efforts to expose and help expose the wrongdoings by the military to our veterans, and also to help those affected and other issues. So anyway, may God bless her in her afterlife, and may she rest in peace. And we do believe that her very last audio appearance on the radio was right here on Phoenix Rising Radio, on Truth Frequency Radio, with myself and Ney Sey 1 month ago. Anyway,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Phoenix.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Well, I didn't want to step on about supporting the truth and supporting Phoenix, because you all can do that with getting a membership at TFR for pennies on the dollar. You can go there and sign up, and then you get all the downloaded shows, and you can find that Joyce Riley show, download it, share it, do with it what you will, and it helps Phoenix keep doing what he does so well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it helps everybody. Also the Alexa Pure water filter, and they have a great deal on that. You can check that out, the Alexa Pure. Yeah, what else? Well, we were talking about Bo Greitz before the break. Yeah, I pull up some info on him. If you're not familiar with Bo Greitz, many of our listeners, well, I won't say many are, maybe a few are. James Gordon Greitz, known as Bo Greitz, a former United States Army Special Forces officer who served for 22 years, including in the Vietnam War. His activities in retirement notably attempted POW rescues in conjunction with the Vietnam War POW MIA issue, and have been proven controversial. Oh, yeah. Gritz may be most notable for his United States presidential campaign association with the Populist Party. In 1992, Gritz ran in 1992 under the slogan, God, Guns, and Grits, and published an isolationist political manifesto entitled The Bill of Grits. According to other things, the Bill of Grits called for the complete closing of the border with Mexico, and the dissolution of the Federal Reserve. Grits lives in Sandy Valley, Nevada, with his wife Judy, now estranged. Yeah, I haven't heard of Bo Greitz in many years, but then again, he ran into some problems and stuff. But I used to listen to Bo back whenever I listened to Joyce Riley on shortwave, and it was funny because I was just talking during the break with Lake, because she was listening what we're saying here in the studio, and she just kind of laughed about it. I'm like, oh yeah, and I told her the story of when I met Bo and how it all happened. It was a funny character, and it never really dawned on me. I knew who he was. I knew he was a Special Forces commander there, and what he was doing, what we were doing, and so it wasn't that odd, we were all there doing that thing, But the funny thing is, Ney Sey, is years later, and it was, wasn't that many years later, but I'm listening to the radio, and it's like, Colonel Bo Greitz, and he starts talking, and he's like, wait a minute. I'm like, I know this guy. This guy bought me a beer down in Central America, and he was a character, and I believe some of the Rambo movies were kind of based upon some of his exploits.
Right. Well, another thing that I just remembered that Joyce was involved with, she was involved with one of the very first reality television, kind of like what was that, Survivor's Island or whatever, Survivor, where it was called American Candidate.
Huh. I
Do
don't
you remember that? It was Montel William was the host.
Oh, is that a television thing?
It was a reality kind of television thing where they picked, there was like 12 people that were picked that claimed to want to be president. And Joyce was one of the contestants.
Oh, man.
And she was voted off, I think, in like the 5th week.
Oh my God, that's funny. Oh, that's crazy. I never heard. I'm not a big TV person, so that doesn't surprise me. But that's funny. You know, a thing I just remembered about Joyce. I've heard her on Bo Greitz's program. Joyce Riley was a guest on Bo Greitz's program. I can't remember the name of his program. I used to listen to it while I was working, but I know that Joyce was a guest maybe more than once on Bo Greitz's program.
Oh yeah, thousands of interviews Joyce has been on, and like you said, that Beyond Treason was one of her most well-known documents that came out there and just explained a lot of the horrific atrocities with the veterans and that, especially with the Gulf Wars, you know, and it's still, you know, to this day, I think the numbers are really low. You know, from my research, I believe that there is over, now the numbers we had in 2002 when I was trying to do a second ride was 700,000 infected and 70,000 dead. And now my estimate is like there's over 900,000 infected and roughly 150,000 veterans that are dead from this strange illness. And this is the biggest thing. If there's one thing that I could get perfectly clear to the audience, if this establishment or the powers that should not be, if they are willing to purposely give the veterans that swear an oath to protect the Constitution and the people within the boundaries of the United States, if they are willing to use us as guinea pigs and expose us to these horrendous things and watch and witness us die slowly, why would you think that they care one iota for the regular public?
Oh, this is true. This is true. And, you know, we've talked about this before here on this program. And, you know, what it is the people who get into power, man, it's almost like an illness for some of them. They almost become, they feel that they have become godlike, that they have the authority to, you know, say who shall live and who shall die. And this is a common problem with human beings. But this isn't anything new. This isn't, we all know it's not isolated to the United States government. This is something that's been going on for millennia. You know, this is the reason, I think, if you go back to the ancient Hebrews, whenever they were establishing and getting established, God, who was giving them instructions, told them that they should not have a king. They were not to have a king. And that's the reason for it. Because people get into positions like you are the king, you are the leader, you know, and man, that extreme power goes to their heads. And the next thing you know, they have kill list and drone kill list and, you know, this, that, and the other. And I mean, we can name the leaders all through history who have done this. It's I don't know, it's a very known weakness in human character.
Well, and then even if you look at the etymologies or the use of words, where like in Europe, where you had lords and ladies, and you had the Lord, and everybody would be like, yes to the Lord, you know, and then all of a sudden it's within the church, the Lord God, and so these people are actually like labeling themselves. And even with the Egyptians, with the pharaohs, a lot of them said they were chosen pharaoh by the decision of God.
Mm-hmm. And then it gets into, like, they almost feel like they are divine entities, and to keep it in their family, then they get into inter-family breeding, incestual, very tight, genetic activity that, isn't really healthy for the mental state, physical state, DNA, etc. So yeah, it's resulted, that mindset has resulted in some weird stuff. There is something interesting. There was a guy. Yeah, I say that lightly. Muammar Gaddafi, who was a leader of Libya, who was killed. Remember Hillary Clinton? We can't.
Butchered.
Saw he died. He was butchered. And the reason he was killed was because he was going to launch a gold-backed currency, the gold dinar, to counter the dollar, and they were going to use it all through Europe. And he had all these massive amounts of gold, and he was a very benevolent person. And there were some interesting things about Libya. There was very little poverty in Libya, and no one was homeless because everyone had an apartment, and the government provided for it. There were a lot of benefits there. If you got married, you had like a 1-year honeymoon, and you received money from the government as a wedding gift and to help you get started. If you wanted to be a farmer in Libya, they gave you all the farm equipment, seeds, and everything, and training for free to get started, and the land to start your farm, because they were encouraging agriculture. And they had the great what was called the eighth wonder of the world, the great aquifer that he had built, and they were continuing to develop, that was going to regreen all of North Africa, providing free water to all the nations of Africa that were in drought. He's doing it for as a gift to the people of Africa, the other nations. Now, the reason I bring him up, is everyone perfect? Absolutely not. Are people demonized for political reasons? Yes, they are. But the reason I segued into this, Ney Sey, is that he wrote a document. It's called the Green Book, Green. And it was 3 books, 3 booklets, and it's actually pretty amazing if you read Gaddafi's Green Book. And he was for the decentralization of that. There were tribes in his land, in Libya. He was like the head of all the tribes loosely, but all the control was at the tribal level, and they all determined their own fate and most of their own laws. It was a very interesting system he set up, and he actually recused himself of like big leadership. That's why he was Colonel Gaddafi, because he was colonel whenever they did the revolution and he took over, and he didn't make himself king or president or anything. He just remained colonel, not general or anything else. He just kept what he was at. And evidence of his belief in humble status was when they went in and finally overtook Libya. There were no palaces to show. They didn't go through the palatial estates of Muammar Gaddafi or anything, because he didn't have any. He lived like everybody else. And he was known for living in tents. And he just like, if you were to walk through Libya, if you wouldn't have known and down the street and say, where does Muammar Gaddafi live in his neighborhood, you would not have been able to pick it out from any other house. And it wasn't because he was hiding. That's just the way he was. So I think was very much hated by other world leaders because he didn't do the whole I am great king and I am better than you status thing. And he considered himself one of the people. And that, combined with the fact that he wanted to overtake the U.S. dollar with gold, that was his death sentence. It truly was.
Well, just look at what happened to the couple of presidents that even went after the small, minuscule World Bank of the Federal Reserve.
Oh, yeah. You mean like Mr. Kennedy?
And Mr. Lincoln, both of them were, let's have our own banks, our own, yeah. And the thing that I always find ironic is when they discuss about government and the way that governments are ran and their constitutions, where the United States Constitution was based upon the Iroquois Confederacy, where Benjamin Franklin was just an admirer of the council system of the Native Americans. And they were using this way of government that the indigenous people were practicing to help construct our government that we're supposed to be abiding to. But then, like we've been discussing, once that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I always wonder, the minute that corporations stop worrying about all of their dollars, then they'll start making sense.
Very true. You're talking about the Iroquois Nation.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that they were called the Five Tribes people. It's actually six. And the Iroquois was a collection of different tribes. And that's why he was trying to model the United States after that. The five tribes of the Iroquois all came together under one council. And there was actually six of them. The Tuscarora, who were a defeated tribe, came up and were part of the Iroquois also. And that was here where I'm at right now in the Northeast. Your lineage actually came from here. What's your original tribal lineage?
Well, the Anishinaabe people, one thing that's usually not discussed with the Iroquois Confederacy, that when the reason why they all joined together and they had this partnership under the Wampum Belt was because of the Anishinaabe people. That the Anishinaabe nation was so large that the Iroquois and the other civilized tribes thought it was a threat. And what their whole union was if the Anishinaabe people decided to start taking more land, then that they would gather together and fight against the Anishinaabe nation.
Right. So you're saying who would fight against the Anishinaabe?
The Iroquois Confederacy. Their Wampum Treaty, where they all joined together as one unit, that they were going to join together in the event that the Anishinaabe people were trying to take more land. Because the Anishinaabe people, they practically, their boundaries were roughly 1/3 of the whole North American continent up in the northeast corner. That was all Anishinaabe land. If you go and look at the earliest, the earliest maps that you'll see that were well mapped of all North America was by the French. And the French originally labeled us Ojibwe, which was a term used for roasted until puckered. And they claimed that it was the way that our moccasins were sewn together that the leather puckered up, but according to our people, it was if you hurt innocents, you would get roasted by a fire until your skin puckered. And so the French were like, they're like, who are those people? And it's like, they're the people that will roast you till they pucker, or Ojibwe. That's the definition of that word, Ojibwe.
Yeah, I'm looking right now. I pull up some Wikipedia action, Iroquois Confederacy, and apparently it was 1142 when they all came together. The history of according to the Iroquois Confederacy, goes back to 1142. It's a Great League of Peace in the Great Lakes area. And the original Iroquois League, as the French knew them, the French had a better handle on Native American than the English, by the way, or Five Nations. The Five Nations or Iroquois, as what the British knew them. The British called them the Five Nations. The French knew them as Iroquois. Occupied large areas of present-day New York State up to St. Lawrence River, west of the Hudson River, and south into northwestern Pennsylvania. The League was composed of the Mohawk, the Oneida, the Onondaga, the Kiowa, Seneca nations. And in or close to, like I was saying before, 1722, the Tuscarora tribe joined the League. And Tuscarora were actually down like South Carolina area. And here we go, having migrated from the Carolinas after being displaced by Anglo-European settlement. Oh, no kidding. Also, Iroquois-speaking tongue people and the Tuscarora were accepted into what became known as the Six Nations. The Tuscarora. That's interesting. You like to you might find Tuscarora interesting. There's a Tuscarora mountain named after them, and Tuscarora actually means the hemp eaters. And some people translate it as hemp shirts because the Tuscarora tribe from the Carolinas cultivated hemp wildly, and they used it, and they weave shirts and different clothing out of the hemp fiber, and they were also known to eat it. So Tuscarora, translation of that is hemp eater. I thought you might get a kick out of that.
Well, it's so funny too because this ideology that the tribes were just like nomadic wanderers, is so misleading because they had 3 different camps that they utilized throughout the year. They had one camp in the winter where they kind of went more deeper in the forest so the conditions wouldn't be so horrific with the winds and stuff. And then they had their summer camps that would be near fields to where they could plant their fields. And then they had their other camp where they would collect their maple syrup. So all of these camps were used throughout the year, but then it got into this ideology that, they had no one place where they lived.
Yeah, that's nonsense. Yeah, I know that for a fact. Here, the Iroquois nations in the east here, the northeast, it was not uncommon for tribes to migrate down the trails, and there were like 5 established very large trails here, like highways, like an interstate system here in the east that spanned all the way from Florida up to Canada. Right here in Pennsylvania, where we're at, Ney Sey, there's one island area, Island of Q, that actually was named by the French. And it was a common destination for Native Americans from as far away as Canada. And they would come down in the summertime because it was teeming with game. I mean,
and trade.
Oh, and trade. Yeah, they would trade. It's like a festival type thing. So the Native Americans would actually travel and go on vacations. They'd break camp and they would go take their families or the young ones by themselves, and they would trade, they would dance, they would fish, they would hunt. They basically partied in the summertime.
My favorite all-time book is by Jack Weatherford, and it's called Indian Givers. And throughout the book, it talks about all the attributes that arose from finding or rediscovering the North America and the South American continents, and it's incredible that people, what we get taught in the school system, I wouldn't even say is 1% of what the whole story is of the indigenous people.
Oh, I know. When you said Indian giver, that right there rings a bell with me. And let me tell you why. I spent 20 years living literally on the walking purchase. And when I say that, there was a section of highway that was right in front of my house. I mean, right there. Cars drove up and down it every day. I drove on it every day. I walked on it. And it was the walking purchase. And you talk about Indian givers, and just the craziness that went on, the thieving, the scheming, the lies. But yeah, it was not uncommon. Sometimes I'd look up and see groups of people, college students or different people. They'd be walking down the walking purchase. It was, like a field trip type thing, going from point to point, doing the walking purchase thing. They'd like walk right in front of my house, wave at me, and like, hey, what's up? So I lived on the walking purchase for a while. And there's so much history that has been lost that it's a shame. People need to know this because it's part of all of our heritage. Anyway, going up on a break. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
We are TFR.
My faith in destiny is all I need to prevail.
Truth Frequency Radio.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
And let's see. Thank you for listening and joining us here on Truth Frequency Radio. Ney Sey, while we were on break here, I was doing a search on Anishinaabe peoples. Very interesting. And like you were saying, they were Northeast Woodlands, primarily a group of culturally related indigenous peoples of Canada and the United States, and included all of the different tribes that you were talking about. And it would appear that there was an interesting mixture here in the northeastern United States and Canada in the east here. And for some reason, these people separated. They kind of took sides with one another, the different tribes. Very interesting. I wish I knew all the history of it. Maybe I'll have the time someday and the luxury to look into it. Fascinating. And, one would wonder what was the division? What was the change? What was it that drew one group of peoples together and another group of peoples together? Do you know anything about that?
Well, my speculations of it is that when the Knights Templar in 1307 were disbanded by the church and the King of France, and they were forewarned. And so their entire fleet that was in France, the largest known fleet in Europe at the time, was owned by the Knights Templar. And they disbanded, and 2/3 of their fleet showed up in England and Scotland. And this is when we got the Scottish Rite and the York Rite of Masonry. So 1/3, I believe, of the Knights Templar fleet, because they had a lot of the ancient maps, because they were the Templars with all the secrets, that they went to the Caribbeans. And they went to South America and also along the coast of North America. And they were trading with the indigenous people back then, since 13. Mm-hmm. And because Columbus was 1492.
Right.
And this is where the pirates came from, the pirateers in the Caribbean islands, where they use these places to have their pirate kingdoms, and when these earlier traders were trading with the Algonquian, because that's how I believe they should have originally been classified, as the Algonquian language group, because that's the oldest known classification, even before Ojibwe. There was a map, I think it was They estimated it 15, I want to say like 1508 or 1512, something like that. And it had a lot of North America on the East Coast divided by language classification. And the whole Northeast area was called the Algonquian. And then when all of a sudden the Native Americans started realizing more and more of Europeans were coming, then there was this infighting about, do we stay, do we greet them, or do we head west? You know, a large part of the Algonquian people, they migrated. They call it the 400-year migration, where they migrated from the East Coast and migrated west all the way up to Minnesota and the Mississippi River. And the story goes that they followed a Migas shell in the sky, that they followed this, and for so many days this Migas shell was up in the western sky, and they headed west, and then it sunk supposedly in the Great Lakes, and then it arose again, and they followed it again. And it did this 7 different times along the Great Lakes, and it goes with the Anishinaabe migration story. You know, but we also have stories of the flood and everything. So when they're all trying to decide, what do we do? Do we stay and greet the Europeans? Do we stay and fight the Europeans? And then this caused a lot of, you know, unrest within the tribe. And this is where my theory is where the major breaking down started occurring. Because another name that they called the Iroquois Confederacy was the 5 civilized tribes. You know, because they especially the Cherokee were incredible with their ability to adapt to the European lifestyle. They adapted so well that that they had to get them off of their land and take their land from them
They actually have a Cherokee reservation still on the East Coast here, and there was a famous Cherokee chief. I forget his name. I did a little study on him. It was actually a white man, and he wasn't someone who had been captured by the Cherokee either. He was a European person who came in and became part of the tribe and ended up being a chief and fought for them in the United States government to have their reservation there and not move. And I believe it's still there in like the Carolinas, South Carolina or something. There's a Cherokee reservation that is back there.
Yeah, well, you know, throughout the Anishinaabe and from when I've learned other tribes too, you know, there was this total acceptance that if you wanted, you know, what I was taught is that the minute you proclaim that you're Anishinaabe, you're Anishinaabe. You know, we say that everybody on Earth, all the humans are all Anishinaabe. And if you wanted to join the tribe, then all you would have to do is prove yourself. And if you proved yourself to such an extent, we had African slaves that were known as great leaders in areas throughout Anishinaabe country. You know, we claim the Anishinaabes were the first underground railroad. We told Harriet Tubman, you know, these are the old trapping lines or the trapping trails to get the slaves out of here, and they were welcome to come up into the North because we didn't believe in that ideology of owning other people.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and it's incredible. And you know, I mean, I guess this is something that I didn't even get the opportunity to share this with you, Phoenix, but you know, we're talking about Native American things. I'm actually really excited because there is a growing opportunity that I am going to be going to Sundance this year.
Sundance. What? Explain to everybody what Sundance is.
Well, the best way I can describe it is that at a point, the Native Americans, they dig a hole in the ground. They create a dance arena or a circle. In the center of the circle, they dig a hole, and then they put a tree in this hole, and then they pack it in so it's standing straight up. And as you've heard me talk about it before, this is the original sundial. And it's also a representation of the circle being the female and the pole being the phallic penis and the union of Mother Earth and Father Sky. And then they do this ceremony of fasting and cleansing and sweat lodges. And then the men will cut 2 parallel lines on their chest, and then they will take like a wooden dowel and they would put it under the skin, under that line, and then they would tie a leather strap to that, both sides of the dowel, and you would be tied to the tree. And then you would dance around the tree and you would blow your eagle whistle, and at a certain time you would lean back against that to the point of where it would rip off your skin. And women can do what they call bloodletting, where they take a little, sometimes they use like a miga shell, or they'll use like a eagle talon that's been sharpened, and they'll do these little hash marks on your bicep. And then also some men will pierce their backs, and they will drag bison skulls around the ceremony. Now, one of the reasons why men do this is because women naturally, through their existence, through birth and labor, they go through pain and suffering, and they tear and they give their blood freely for life, for children. And so it is considered an honor as a man to show women the respect of going through this, where they go through the pain and suffering, and they bleed and they tear for life. Because most indigenous people believe that men are the weakest and women are the most important. It's not like women ruled. They just held women in a high reverence. You know, they had an equal, if not better, standing, because, you know, you need both men and women to create life. You know, but there is Mother Earth that we all live on, and from Mother Earth comes life. You know, and so I went to that outdoor festival, and there was an elder there, and I asked him, I said, have you ever had a guy in a wheelchair participate in Sundance? And his answer to me was, you. And I started laughing, and I said, that's a lot of pressure to put on a guy. And he said, well, are you going to come out? And I asked when it was, and he said July 5th in South Dakota. There's sundancing going on throughout the month of July. You know, it has to do with the celestial, you know, sun and the moon, and, you know, the whole dance of the sun and the earth and all of that. But throughout July and into August, our Sundance is going on throughout Indian country. And I've tried to go to 3 of them in the past, and something has always occurred that has hindered me from going. But it's getting closer and closer, and things are getting more and more positive that I get to participate. And I'm so excited to be a part of such a ceremony, and it's such an honor, you know, because I've wanted to pierce before, you know, because I have children, you know, and so because of having children, I had a woman go through that pain and suffering for that blessing of my children. And I think it's the least thing that I could do to honor them than to go through pain and suffering.
Fascinating. You know, a lot of people don't know that story or realize that. And, you know, that is something a lot of people don't know, not only just all the facts and the reason for the Sundance, but also the way Native Americans structured life and respected one another. And that's the thing, the saying, and I say it all the time, many hands make for easy labor. It's not like the Native Americans, the men went out, they hunted, they hung out, they smoked the pipes and did nothing. I mean, everybody worked, everyone, and the men would help with the women's work. Everybody participated. Nobody sat around when there was work to do. Everyone would take care of it. Some of the old Western movies and stuff, they show different glamorized, not historically accurate story where the men are just like basically walk around all tough chested and doing what they will and slapping the women, and the women are cooking and cleaning and doing all. That's not the way it was. Everybody partook, and there was respect between one another. I mean, yeah, there was a certain hierarchy, especially with some people when it concerned Europeans that maybe they captured or whatever. But within the culture itself, it was probably one of the most fair and non-sexist cultures that, much more so than Europeans. Let me put it that way.
Well, it is funny when you look at a lot of the indigenous tribes around the world where you see this equality between men and women, but then all of a sudden when you follow this lineage of Europeans, at one point it was like, no, women, you are our property, just like the whole thing of husband and wife. Look up the definition of wife and see how happy some of you are to be married. And I make a joke, when I'm the megaphone man at outdoor festivals, I'll roll around with my megaphone and I'll say, respect the womb, men. Respect the womb, men. Because that is where life comes from. And thank you, women, for what you do. Because I know if men had to give birth, we would not be as populated as we are right now. And it blows me away that women secrete endorphins that tell them to forget what it was like to go through birthing.
I know. That's amazing. To witness the miracle of birth, I have done this and actually delivered a baby before myself. But that's so true. No matter what the pain or what happens, when the child is here, the child is in this existence, and the mother holds that child, it's like all memory of anything troublesome is gone instantly. I mean, like, boom. I mean, no drugs needed. No drugs. It's a miracle. It really is.
Oh, and that reminds me, if I can placate to my family, I want to say happy birthday to Ella Murphy, who my friend Mark Murphy of the band Wookie Foot, who is a dear friend of mine of 17 years, him and his wife just had a baby yesterday. And so it's really interesting that, I lost this incredible woman that was part of my life, Joyce. But then the following day, little Ella came into our world. And so it's incredible, life and death. It is just part of the cycle, and we're part of the cycle too. So, do you want to live life or do you want to live dying? And we get that choice, and no matter how rough and how tough it gets, we keep rolling on, and if you're having a hard time rolling on, let me know. You can sit in my lap and you can roll with me for a while.
Oh my gosh. It's so true though. I mean, it's a constant cycle. It's a constant cycle. We talked a lot about other things other than current events tonight. And I think that's a good thing because anybody can listen to the news. There's always damning things out there. There's always bad things. But, to honor someone who works so hard for other people like Joyce Riley, I think it's very, very worthy of our time and effort to do so. And I hope people were edified by it, and God bless her and for all that she did. And just to talk about heritage of us all. You know, some people may be listening like, I'm not a Native American. Well, you know what? You're European. We're all in this together. A lot of the customs, a lot of the things that are commonly referred to as Native American today were European. I mean, you really think they were forging iron hatchets at drop forges when we got here? I don't think so. You know, it's a mix. I mean, we all learn from one another, and I think there needs to be a balance. And I hope, and I know that people do this. We need to learn from one another. Yeah, there were bad things picked up by both sides, but we need to pick up the good and look at the good, and that has to do with unity, family, the environment, community, and the good things in all.
You know, the Native Americans, we have a custom, the Anishinaabe, that when we meet somebody, we say "boozhoo," and to spell it, you know, we didn't have a written language. It's Boozhoo, and some people are like, oh, that's from the French bonjour, but it have a reverence to a teacher in our history called Wayne Boozhoo or Nana Boozhoo. And when you say boozhoo to someone that you meet for the first time, you're in a sense asking them a question. Are you Wayne Boozhoo or are you Nana Boozhoo? And are you here to teach me? Because like you were saying, we all believe that we all have something to teach each other. You know, and this goes with my dislike for the word stupid, you know, because nobody's stupid. You know, someone may not be as well learned or have a lot of knowledge, or they may be ignorant to a subject, you know, but no one's stupid because they do know something, whether it be painting or fixing a car or being a plumber or mathematician or an accountant, you know. And like you said, we're all here together. We all have a skill to share, but are we willing to be patient enough to see what that other person has to teach us? You know, to let them speak, to let them share their experiences, because this is how we get through diversity. This is how we get through challenges where we can discuss what we need to do, you know, plot our course and make our direction. And I'm not saying this works in every situation, because every situation merits on its own. Because yes, in a time of emergency, we need people that are immediately going to take control and get through the challenge, you know. But if there's one thing that I can add, that I'd like to ask of people, take the time to let other people talk and share, you know, share what they have. Because I know I like to be heard. That's why I bought a megaphone.
That's funny. The megaphone, man. Oh, dude, that's so crazy. I can't imagine walking around the megaphone like Alex Jones. Rah, 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 rah. Oh, God, that's funny. But it's good. I mean, it's expression and telling people, and people hear it. That's pretty cool. The megaphone man.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll roll around with banter, and I like to use humor. You know, and one of the things that I was saying a lot over the last weekend was I'm planting seeds of knowledge with my sledgehammer of love. And so I would say some pretty harsh things, but they were true statements, you know, but I would try to say them in a whimsical manner, you know. So it's so much easier to break barriers with people when you start with humor. It's so easy to talk to someone.
That's true. You ever have anybody look at you and you get the feeling that the only reason they're not kicking you in the butt is because you're in a wheelchair? You ever do that? You ever have You ever get that look like, dude, if you weren't rolling around, I would mess you up right now.
Oh, I've actually made that statement where I've said it's always surprising what they let the cripple get away with and what he says.
God, you're so wrong. Say, man, I can't believe you do that. But it's smart. I mean, use the tools that you have. And even if those tools may be like wheels that you roll around on, that's pretty cool. Wheels and a megaphone. Oh, man, we talked about a lot of stuff tonight, a lot of different issues. And again, condolences to Joyce Riley's family, and may she rest in peace. And for everything she did. And again, like Ney Sey pointed out, and we're pretty sure the very last radio recording, the very last time she was ever on the air was here on Phoenix Rising Radio, on Truth Frequency Radio with myself and Ney Sey 1 month ago. And you can search that out. We got like a minute and 30 seconds, bro. What do you want to say before you go?
Well, if everybody would take the opportunity to do one simple thing, and that's respect everything. And then if you can add a little bit of love on top of that respect, the more power to you. And bring back the word toodles.
Bring back the word toodles. That'll happen. The respect thing, I can do that. Bringing back toodles. I don't know. That's a task. But anything is possible. And that's the thing. Ney Sey, thank you, brother, for joining me tonight. I appreciate it so much.
Oh, thank you, Phoenix. It's always a pleasure. And maybe next Thursday we'll be calling from Sundance.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, we'll keep up on that. Everybody else, thank you for listening this evening. Thank you for everything. Our listeners, people hanging out in the chat room. We'll be back on Thursday with Bob Gilpatrick of Boomers. He'll be joining us. But right now, the most important thing, find someone you love and tell them that you love them, because you never know. You just never know. You know what? There's so much to learn in this world from one another. Am I going to learn something from you? Will you learn something from me? You know, it's so true. Try to find something new every day that you learn. And sometimes I learn things in a day, and I really wish I wouldn't have known that. But, you know, try to learn something new. And that's the way it is. But bottom line, love, people. Love and respect. That's it. We'll be back on Thursday. Good night, Ney Sey. See you, brother.
Toodles.
Toodles to you. See you guys. God bless.